So it's probably about time for me to admit that I have a bit of a problem. Because I built this, and this is the Nemesis Mk3 class Battlecruiser, and as you can tell from the lag, it is enormous. So it is roughly 1.4 kilometers in length, roughly, somewhere between 1.4 and 1.5. And it's based on the Resurgence class Battlecruiser slash Star Destroyer from Star Wars, which, flame me if you want, I don't care. This is the only good thing to ever come out of the sequels. The rest of anything from them is just garbage. That is my firm opinion. And so I decided that a while ago I'd try with the Mark 1 to create something like the Resurgence. Now, even this is nowhere near the actual size, because again, it's like 1.4, 1.5 kilometers. The original version that this is based off is like 2.9. So this is still roughly half-ish the size. But I really liked the design, so I figured I'd try my hand at it one more time, since I finally figured out my composite grids, and that allows me to build much, much larger, and much, much laggier. So I really like the truss in the front and the hangar style of this ship, but I didn't give myself the size, obviously, required to make the full Resurgence. So what I did is I took the design, I used as many sources as I could, so online sources, cutaways, lots of stuff from Battlefront 2, considering how there's a supremacy where you can go into the ship and you fight inside the Resurgence, as well as there's the Starfighter Assault, so you can get some good looks around the outside of the ship. So this is the front section. This is one entire section by itself. And I did my best to sort of mimic the girder and like detailing inside. Like there's a little on the other side of these heat sinks. These are actually important. On the other side of these heat sinks, there's this little like drop down area. Normally, there's actually like a TIE fighter like area where you can launch from an underground hangar and fly up and out. And that was not gonna happen. But I really wanted ships to be able to fly through the girders, so I cut the wall out and then put a hangar bay behind it. So that's one of the modifications I made to the design. And this hangar bay is quite large. If I did my math right, which I might not have, it's very possible. It should be able to hold roughly 48 fighters, so that's 4 full squadrons. So there's 9 here, 10 back here because it's a 3x3, 5x2, and then we have a 3x5 back here. Originally, I was actually going to seal these off with hangar doors, but then I realized that I put the connectors between the sections that hold them all together on top of this light gray block. If I got rid of it to put the hangar doors in, it would disconnect everything, and so I decided it wasn't worth it. So instead of having several smaller hangars, I just joined all of them together. So you have 2 exits on the right, 2 exits on the left. You have 1 in the front, and then you have 1 underneath. And I'm not super proud of the detailing done in here, but I did the best I could. Because I didn't want to encroach too much into the side and then cut out a lot of like the space that for fighters just to drop straight down. And I also didn't want to cut back into the wall too much because there's not a whole lot beyond this. So I decided just to kind of compromise and leave it as it is. And then this was a rework I had to do to the ship with these blue lights. I'll show you my reference images towards the end of the video that I used. But I couldn't quite get the hangar that I was looking for, because if I wanted to do that, I have to make the ship like 2 or 3 times the size. Because normally there's like a TIE fighter rack that goes up in like steps beyond here. But I don't have the height or the width for that, so I just didn't do it, and I compromised by making these shapes that resemble it, but obviously I don't have the steps with the TIE fighter racks into the wall. I couldn't do that. And then let's continue the exterior. This is probably the single most detailed ship I have ever built. Because I'm really happy that I did this. I gave myself a lot of space, both in terms of height and depth, to work with here. So I use a lot of my reference images to sort of copy a bunch of structures from Battlefront 2 in particular into this space. Granted, I actually had more space than I knew what to do with, so a lot of these structures are actually repeating. And then I also took the space and mounted some 240mm cannons in here, which kind of actually reminds me of the Munificent class frigate, where it has these overhanging bits, and underneath them they have guns that can shoot forward, sideways, and down, but not up. Weird little comparison there. And then these heat sinks are particularly important, which I'll mention later. But I just kind of wanted to show all the greebling and the work I did, because I'm quite proud of it. I think it's neat. I've been using these lights to try and add some depth to the structure, so it's not just dark spaces. And then there's actually these little observation rooms, which none of this ship is pressurized. It's a creative-only ship. And so it has lights in it, but there's nothing else. It's not a functional feature of the ship, and you have to go outside the ship to get into it. But I thought it was neat, so I figured I'd add it in. It gives you a pretty decent view ahead of the hangars, but you can't really see anything beyond the sides and front, which is expected. But yeah, enough patting myself on the back. Let's continue. I apologize for the lag. It's going to be a very laggy video. So this ship actually takes the cake from the Atlas for being the biggest thing I've ever built that moves. I still have to rebuild the Iron Cross station. What's it shooting at? Is there an SPRT? Well, there goes the longswords. I bet we'll be seeing an explosion over there. I can kind of see it over here. A little speck. I don't think I'll be seeing it for much longer. There's going to be a rather enormous explosion. There's 60 longsword missile launchers, and they're each octuple launchers. So 30 of them are probably firing right now. So 30 times 8 would be 240 missiles. And salvos of 30. I think it'll be pretty darn dead. I kind of want to see the explosion, though. Shouldn't be too much longer. Or what is it shooting at? It's not shooting at the SPRT thing yet. That should be actually outside of the plane. I'm curious what it is shooting at. Whatever. Also the nice thing about all this depth is it does give me places to put these heat sinks, which is used for a stealth drive. So I actually made it so this thing can cloak and go invisible. Although when it's invisible, its shields are down, its weapons are deactivated, and so it can only really move while being invis, but it is invis. Holy frames. So this thing, I actually, with how many heat sinks I managed to put into it, can go invisible for about 18 minutes continuously. And the reason I did that is because I always kind of envisioned the Resurgence, because it's a very well-rounded ship, but it particularly specs into carrying and heavy weapons. So I kind of imagined it as a panzer ship, or a convoy raider slash battlecruiser where it hunts down and kills cruisers. So I outfitted it to do both. And so here's just some of the more exterior detailing I wanted to show off, because I spent a very long time doing this, at least 8 or 9 hours just doing the greebling work down here. I won't show off the rest of it as much in terms of the greebling. So I did a count, it's about 104 of these 600mm triple turrets. Or the lights on the superstructure. And so you have a 104 gun, you can do 52 gun broadside, or you can do 104 guns shooting straight forward. with some minor exceptions being there's some areas over here where I think one gun might be blocking the directly forward arc. But other than that one gun, they should all be able to shoot forward. We've got some tiering of the longsword missiles, defensive guns, offensive weapons. We've got plasma cannons, 480mm cannons, the 600mm cannon primary. Got missile launchers, and we have the 240mm, mostly lining the brim. So you can output a lot of firepower of a lot of various calibers onto a target. So you can deal with any target, or you can just really destroy one target. Like I said, it's mostly outfitted for killing cruisers, and so that the 600mm cannons is the primary weapon. And I figure it's probably time to show off the bridge. Now, this was actually really hard for me to figure out how to design, because there isn't really any images of the Resurgence bridge. This is just kind of a little open area. I'll lead up to one of the observation platforms. So I go straight up. I don't bonk my head. I bonked my head. I knew it. I didn't put any lights in here just because I don't expect people to really be in here much. It's just an observation deck, and there's another one on the right. There are these external command shares, which is mostly used to manage the sections. If you disconnect each section, it'll just fall off, and so you're going to need to have those chairs in order to reconnect them if you accidentally disconnect them, which I would not recommend. It is a very, very time-consuming process. So you can kind of look out over everything, which is important. I don't exactly expect this section to survive very long if you actually get into a fight. No, it's not heavy armor, just light armor with some shaping to it. But the bridge doesn't exactly have a great view, so this lets you see things even if you can't exactly do anything from here or expect to survive very long. And it's just one of the structures on the Resurgence bridge that I thought I'd mimic. So going into the ship, this light, I'm still not super stoked about it. I'm not sure if it's entirely correct or not. But it's like a weird pale blue light that they use for the Resurgent, and so I was trying to mimic it as best I could. And so this is what I came up with. So we've got some command stations. We've got the command walkway with the command trench. We got the main shield control, as well as the main cockpit. Now, since this ship is creative only, it doesn't have a jump drive, so I'm not super worried about that. And then I've put all the master controls into the single chair. You could duplicate them as many times as you want, or change them however you feel like. I don't really care. As long as it works with the one chair, I don't care. Although I would again be very careful. I've labeled all of the connectors for each section, and then grouped them up so that you can disconnect certain stations if you wish, in like a cinematic where it takes so much damage and then sections break off. But again, if you're going to have to reattach them, be very, very careful. So this leads down to the stairways. I didn't like the stairways. Stairway lighting for me is really, really annoying. So I just kind of left them dark and abyssal. Which, meh, it's fine, I guess. And then going back here, because this bridge is so large with its footprint, I decided to give it some conference rooms. Nothing terribly fancy in here. The darkness actually kind of helps with the lack of detail. And then you have all these hollow projectors, so you can project different ships of whatever type you'd like. Same thing on the other side. But the nice thing is back here, actually, we have a med bay. So getting back to the bridge, should you die, is just kind of a short stroll. And then I didn't actually include any longitudinal or transverse bulkheads inside the bridge. It's all just one big armored box. So if something comes screaming through that window and annihilates the wall, well, you're kind of screwed. But there's 3 layers of heavy armor above your head. So unless it hits coming straight through that window, you're probably fine. And it's not exactly a huge opening either, but you can only really see straight forwards. which is why those observation platforms can be somewhat useful. So leading down into the rest of the hull, we'll go down one of the two stairways. I shut off the right stairway, so we'll go down the left. No particular reason other than why not. So I did try and duplicate the Battlefront 2 interior relatively accurately. There's some compromises, particularly in what Battlefront 2 calls the reactor room, which I can't imagine as an actual reactor room, which I will explain in a moment. So the actual main reactor is in this hallway, which maybe I should have made the lights brighter. They're supposed to have 5 meters of radius. Is underneath this foot area. Because there's a huge reactor bulb underneath like the central bridge area in the superstructure, but it doesn't really match with what they show in Battlefront 2 and the Supremacy where you're fighting inside the Resurgence. So I just kind of did 2 separate reactors where the main reactor over there is actually kind of a coolant area, is how I imagine it. So that leaves. So I kind of broke up and reversed some of the interior. So this is one of the 2 big rooms where the command posts are, where you have to capture before moving into the reactor. So I just kind of put a bunch of consoles in here. I didn't really know what to do with the space up here because you never see it. At least not really. So there's a stairway up that leads back into the main hallway, but didn't know what to do with this space, so I just kind of left it empty. You can do more conference rooms or whatever, I don't care. Whatever you imagine can go in there can probably fit. As long as it's not survival items, because the ship is not survival capable. You could make it, but it would take a lot of time and a lot more effort. And it's already laggy as a creative only ship, so I decided not to do it. So here I have these sort of turbo lift looking things, which is like the Star Wars elevator. So here's the main reactor room. And I couldn't make it as bright as they did in the game, even with like messing with the lights a bunch. Which in some ways is actually somewhat beneficial, since I can't exactly do the endless void that they do in the game, where you can just fall forever and then die. So I dimmed the lights so that it wasn't super bright on the walkways. And I think this looks relatively good, it's just a bit dim. But it also helps with the illusion of there actually isn't anything underneath here, and you can just slam your face in the ground. So I matched as many details as I could. I added in some extra details, like these red lights. They're not in the game, that's not a detail, I just thought it was neat, so I did it. And so instead of going from the hangar bay, presumably, in Supremacy, to the 2 command posts and then to the reactor room, I had the command post areas over there, the hangar bay right here. And it's lagging again. And then we have these 2 rooms on the left and right. One's a med bay, the other's a CIC. So there's the bridge, 3 med bays, and 2 CICs. So this is either the forward med bay or the forward CIC. But not terribly fancy, they're just stripped down and functional. So you have one of the many med bays. So this is if you died and you need to respawn and grab a fighter, because there's definitely going to be spares. If you have filled it up with fighters, there'll be spares. You can just respawn around the corner, get into your fighter, and fly off again. And this is probably the forward CIC then. Which this CIC can command everything except for the movement, really. Because of the way that all the systems are set up. I could do like a thrust override to let you maneuver, but it's just a lot more work. And then I left these flat areas in front of the chairs where you could install LCD screens and then put a bunch of stuff to display, but I just don't do it because I usually just command it in third person, or I'm at the bridge and I'm looking out the front. So more consoles everywhere just for detailing. Weird pale blue lights. And then for some reason they have this massive blank doorway, which, whatever. It's fine, I guess. And you fly across because there isn't any actual direct way over. Gosh darn it, it's lagging again. And we'll go back to the main. There's two. So in the Resurgence cutaways, there's 3 reactors. One of them is underneath the feet in the main bulge. Then there's 2 auxiliary reactors, one on the left and one on the right, which is what these hallways go to. And I wasn't sure exactly what to do with this hallway, so I just made it a really long straight hallway. So the auxiliary reactor room is just kind of, I didn't know what to do with the actual reactors, because again, it's just a bulb. I didn't know what to put in it, and I wanted it to be an actual room, so I just kind of did this circular walkway. It looks octagonal, but it is actually a circle. Just the consoles don't have a 30 and 60 degree angle version to them, so I couldn't do that. So these are the reactor towers, I guess. And then it's the same one on the right. Oh, that was annoying because I had to make each room independently because it's 2 separate sections that join, I think, actually right at this seam. So everything on the left and right at the rear, I had to manually duplicate every time. So there's some things that might be slightly inconsistent. But it should be, I couldn't tell noticeably, so I think it's fine. And to the main med bay and CIC, which is buried underneath the bridge and not next to the reactors. So if you detonate the main reactor bulb, you still have the other 2. But you also don't blow up your CIC and med bay. I'm pretty sure this is the med bay. Which, it's just a bigger med bay. There's nothing super fancy about it. It's not like the Atlas where I had like a triple stack. Wasn't worth it. Kind of struggled with it on the Atlas anyway. And it's just a bigger CIC. So you've got a lot of fallback options in case things get damaged. And really, as long as you have your repulsor lifts, which are actually right on the other side of this wall, you're probably fine. I didn't really include any thrusters in this ship except for at the very rear. And I just use repulsors for everything, and they only really need power. So having these massive reactors everywhere, and then each section has its own reactors and shields and stuff, allows you to really just control the ship. As long as you're in the right section. If you try and maneuver it from a section that doesn't have all the repulsors, it actually doesn't respond. So you'd have to do a thruster override. And you wouldn't have control of any gyroscopes other than the gyroscopes in the section you're already in. So really, you have the forward CIC, but it's only going to really be good for commanding armament, shields, and stuff like that. You won't be able to maneuver. This section, with the main CIC and the bridge, you can actually control the ship. So, I figured I might as well give a short demonstration. So this thing is extremely unwieldy just due to its enormous size. And because it's a composite grids don't normally react very quickly. Although I feel like it's relatively responsive here. Because there's a maximum angular momentum that you can get, which I'm pretty sure I'm nearing right now. And then in order to slow it down, you have to actually counter swing it, because whatever's already spinning is going to keep spinning, because it's separate from the command section. I can actually get it to stop, maybe. Okay, there we go. The other thing, it will slow itself down, but it will never fully stop. So it will constantly be maintaining like 0.16 meters per second in a direction. So once you start this thing moving, good luck getting it to stop. But I also gave it a lot of repulsors, so in order to actually be a battlecruiser, it actually has to be fast enough and maneuverable enough. It's not terribly maneuverable, but it is agile. So if I just hold A real quick and move to the left. Now, my speedometer goes up to 500 meters per second. But we're getting an acceleration of at least 5 meters per second. And then if I go up, it's actually slightly faster. Forward, probably closer to 30 meters per second. Same thing in reverse, I just duplicated it. And then down. Again, the only issue with this thing is actually turning it or rotating it, because the angular momentum does not like it. And once it starts going somewhere, it really doesn't like to stop in terms of turning. Which I think with a vessel of this size and scale, I think it's a worthy and acceptable drawback, because you wouldn't expect something of this size to be terribly agile. So it can run down other ships, and you could adjust how many repulsors you want if you want to make it slower. But that should be the full tour. Oh, I forgot to show off the stealth. Let me show off the stealth real quick. I'm assuming it's on 3, so if I hit 9, we'll start cloaking. It takes a little bit of time, but it actually works much better than I thought it would, because it actually cloaks even the sections that don't have stealth drives. So with this, you can be cloaked, fully cloaked, for 18 minutes continuously, and then you can uncloak. So no weapon will actually detect you, no sensor will detect you. You'll just kind of be a vague shimmer, which players can see. But the thing about that is that it actually is really hard to see at a distance, at least. If you're more than like 3 kilometers away and you're cloaked, I don't think anyone's going to see you. Because all that it really is these little like T-shaped cross things. So I think this stealth system works pretty well. Functionally, I like it for being a Panzer Schiff type deal where you convoy raid or you're going after stations, fleets, and task forces. And I just imagine the ship sneaking up on them very slowly, like no thrusters, you're just drifting through space, cloaked, with power, like all systems powered down except for the cloak. And then you approach, and once you get close enough, you reactivate all your systems, decloak, and just blow everything up. So that's why I gave it the stealth drive. The thing about this, though, is that the stealth drive overheats when you deactivate it, which I just did. And you will be visible in this ship from over 1,000 kilometers away, apparently. Like 1,013 some kilometers of signal from the overheat system. Which I think is acceptable, because you really just need to fade in, hit, and then leave. With this thing, you're not really going to cloak and run, because you're just going to crush them. So, I quite enjoy this ship. Made some modifications for my own personal taste. Tried to be relatively faithful to some of it. And I think it's neat, but it's a very, very laggy ship. So I would not recommend if you're on a weaker system. Oh, hey, look, the reactors. That's hidden in the towers. So yeah, as this thing fades back in, I hope you enjoyed this design. I actually had a lot of fun making it. Although it was fairly difficult to try and get all the detailing done right, so let me know what you think.